It's winter in the south. Everything looks deadish except what's still green, which brings me to today's video topic, evergreens. If I dropped you in the south in January, gray skies, cold fingers, everything, and I said build a functional home apothecary from what's still out and about, could you do it? In the southeast, winter doesn't mean no medicine. Winter means evergreens, resins, volatile oils, and bitter components, and tannins. There are plenty of plants that don't clock out when the temperature drops. And today I'm going to walk you through how to identify them and what they've been used for traditionally, what modern research says, and the safest way to begin working with them in your own apothecary. Cool? Let's go! Hi friends, if you're new here, I'm Cameron Strauss. I'm a clinical functional herbalist. I have a BS in biology. I'm a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild, and I've spent the last decade plus with my hands in the dirt and my nose in research, helping people move from cautious to confident with plants. Standard note, this education is not medical advice. If you're pregnant, nursing, or on kidney meds or dealing with kidney issues, then talk to a doctor. Also, another important blanket beginner statement, positive plant ID is not optional. If you're not 100% sure, don't ingest it, period. Let's get oriented. As a broad statement, many evergreens are rich in volatile oils. And volatile doesn't mean angry, it just means that they evaporate readily. These are aromatic constituents that plants use for defense and sometimes communication. Many are also rich in resins. That's sticky, protective chemistry that plants use to seal wounds and to discourage microbes. Many evergreens also have bitters and tannins that can be used to support digestion and tighten and tone tissues through protein binding. So the pattern you'll keep seeing today is aromatics for moving stuck, damp, congested patterns, resins for barriers, skin, and sticky respiratory gunk, and bitters and astringents for digestive support and tissue tone. And don't forget, we match the plant to the pattern and the person, not the plant to a specific diagnosis or issue. Okay, let's talk about trees. Trees first. So this is Eastern Red Cedar, Juniperus virginiana. I love her, but also she needs some guideposts for how to utilize her. Cedar is really strong medicine and does have some really specific contraindications. So in general, when we're working with juniper, we need to remember it's a warming and drying aromatic. And it's especially useful when things feel damp or stuck or heavy in the respiratory system or in the urinary tract. But also, it's a really irritating plant, and it can be kind of irritating to the urinary tract and is really specifically contraindicated in kidney disease and kidney weakness. Also, if you're pregnant or trying to conceive or breastfeeding, it's also a no-go, and that's all because of its thujone content, which is a specific essential oil that this tree is high in. I actually rarely used juniper until a few years ago, and I've really been scared off of it due to concerns of mine when working with people with kidney and bladder infections, and just the concern of causing more irritation. And I had the chance to talk to Phyllis Light, which is a Southern folk herbalist, about juniper. And she said that the reason that we want to use juniper to irritate the urinary tract when we have a urinary infection is when that person is unable to urinate. And so we use juniper in those situations to help support getting urine out of the body when it's irritated and withholding. Many indigenous and regional traditions use Eastern Red Cedar similarly as a tea for coughs and colds, and topically and internally for rheumatism. The volatile oils in juniper, cedrol, and thujone are useful as an expectorant and as an anti-infective, and can be used for tea in short periods of time for thick mucus and chest congestion. It pairs really well with things like elecampane or mullein or thyme. And I really like using it in instances of coughs, colds, and urinary tract infections, just like traditional herbalists used to do. Let's talk about identification. So Eastern Red Cedar, Juniperus virginiana, isn't actually a cedar, it's a juniper. And you're gonna look for scale-like leaves that overlap tightly, which are not needle-like, and they're arranged in 4 rows along the twigs. Mature trees have shaggy reddish-brown bark that peels in vertical strips, and the berries are actually small blue cones with a waxy coating, which is a giveaway that you've got a juniper. people often bring up the two European juniper species that are not safe to work with when I talk about juniper. Those are Savin juniper, which is Juniperus sabin, and Juniperus occidendris. But these don't grow in the US, so no worries if you're stateside. When working with juniper, you can make a tea or an infusion, and also a salve or an oxymel. I don't commonly use it in tincture form because of concerns over concentrating the thujone content. So those are kind of some of the primary preparations that I do with juniper. You can also get the berries and make an oxymel, and that's honestly one of my favorite things to do. If you're interested in this plant and more information about plants just like this, you can check out our Herbal Medicine Monthly Subscription, where I talk about one plant per month in depth, and I also ship you a kit so that you get to experience the plant as well as learning about it at the same time. And that is, in my opinion, the best way to learn about plants. Pine is the people's tree. Pine is generous, it's plentiful, it's sturdy. Pine is like, here, have needles, have resin, have aromatics, and don't forget the vitamin C. Today we're talking about loblolly pine, which is Pinus taeda, and the longleaf pine, Pinus palustris. Pine needle tea has a long folk use as a winter respiratory support plant and to reverse and prevent scurvy. Pine resin also is an anti-infective addition to salves, and you can use it as a muscle rub, and it's also great for cold, stiff joints. Pine needle is a source of vitamin C, of course, but content varies by species and also the age of the needles, the season, and how you prepare it. The amount is appreciable enough that there's a wonderful account of the Iroquois in 1536 showing a French explorer, Jacques Cartier, and his crew pine needle and bark tea, which cured them of scurvy. One of the gems of pine is its resin, which we've already talked about, but resin is the tree's bandage, and resins are amazing because they do that. They're anti-infective because they're used by the tree to protect damaged tissue and to prevent infection, and they do the same thing for us. Resins are also readily dissolvable in oil-based preparations, so they extract very well into topical preparations for muscle aches and anti-infective and healing salves. As far as the science goes, the research is mostly in animal models or in vitro, but there are some helpful congruences between traditional use and scientific findings. Pine oil from Pinus palustris containing resin formulations reduced dermal inflammation, accelerated recovery from experimental scald burns, which is terrible, but that's how they figured it out, and reduced burn-related pain in mice. Extracts and residues from loblolly pine or Pinus taeda bark and needles showed an antioxidant and broad antimicrobial activity in vitro. Many of the research findings for these two pines have been focused on its concentrated essential oil, and those oils are antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory, but the dosage and concentration really matters when we're using extracts, and we don't want to use essential oils internally or undiluted topically. That's totally unsafe. So at this point, we'll say that the essential oils in this plant are anti-infective, and we know traditionally whole plant extracts are helpful with infections. If you can cook, you can make a pine resin salve. All you're gonna do is gather the resin, you're gonna look for a tree with a wound, and then once you find that wound, you're gonna peel off a little bit of that resin. You're gonna put it into a jar, and you're gonna pour oil into it. You're gonna put the jar into a double boiler and cook for a few hours on low, strain, and then combine with wax into a salve. You can also make a high-proof alcohol tincture, which will extract the resins in pine well. It also makes a really lovely oxymel. You can just grab the pine needles and extract them in vinegar and honey, half vinegar, half honey. The dosage when working with a cough would be 2 droppers full, somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 5 times a day, for somewhere in the ballpark of 4 to 5 days. So these are loblolly needles, loblolly pine needles, and they generally will grow in fascicles of 3. So we have these leaves are called fascicles. They're just 1 leaf per fascicle, and it's a little bit different. Pine has its own terminology, and you have 3 fascicles per bundle, and that is how you know this is a loblolly pine. Ta-da! Here we have a southern magnolia, Magnolia grandiflora, and this is one of those plants that people walk past for years because they think it's just landscaping, but meanwhile it is really an amazing medicinal plant. Some important ID features: so we have this smooth bark that's quite gray. We have thick, glossy leaves that have a suede underside, and they're a bit fuzzy and a little bit more brown. And then we also have an unmistakable magnolia vibe with this central cone on the flowers, and those are also called receptacles. And then we have large white or pinkish and really strong smelling petals. So magnolia broadly has a long history of being a bitter tonic in traditional systems, and magnolia bark we call an aromatic bitter, which just means that it's bitter and also has a bit of a floral taste. That means that we can use it to stimulate digestion and move fluids in the body. There's actually a good bit of research focusing on Magnolia officinalis and Magnolia grandiflora, and they contain neolignans, so specifically honokiol and magnoliol and methylhonokiol. And they have anti-inflammatory effects, they're neuroprotective, they're analgesic, which means they help with pain, they're antimicrobial, and they have some anti-cancer effects in preclinical models. As for now, the mechanisms for action for these include the cannabinoid receptors, so receptor 1 and 2, and CB1 regulates memory, pain, mood, and motor control, and CB2 are found in immune cells, and they help with modulating inflammation and immune response. Magnolia also does work on the GABAergic system, which we talk about a lot, but the GABA system is the calming neurotransmitter family in our bodies and brains, and Magnolia is active on the GABA system. We also see in the research on magnolia an impact on nuclear factor kappa B, NFKB, and mitogen activated protein kinase MAPK inhibition. These are really important cell signaling pathways that often work together to control cellular responses to stress, inflammation, and immune activation, as well as metabolism. They also help with linking external stimuli to gene expression, but their prolonged activation is really implicated in diseases like diabetes and cancer, while their acute activation by exercise promotes health. And magnolia really supports the regulation of those systems. Clinical data is minimal. There is one randomized trial showing Magnolia grandiflora bark mouthwash reduced salivary streptococcus mutans. Scientists also tested a plant extract from magnolia bark to see if it could help with nerve pain. And nerve pain is like a shooting, burning, or tingling pain that really is hard to treat, and it affects about 1 in 12 people, and it does not respond really well to painkillers. And magnolia bark extract actually did reduce pain sensitivity in mice with nerve injuries. So I have also found that it does back up those uses clinically, and I have a friend specifically who has really loved using magnolia bark for pain and nerve pain specifically. So what else would a clinical herbalist do with magnolia? I will use it for supporting stress response, and I like using it and really lean on it most when digestion is sluggish, stress is high, and it's causing immune dysregulation and systemic pain, and we need deep support. I might also use this to help with metabolism and sluggish metabolism. It is also a lovely nervine and mild anxiolytic, and pairs really well with things like motherwort, skullcap, blue vervain, and ashwagandha. Now let's talk about harvesting. So I want to make sure that you don't go ring barking magnolia, and that's when you just harvest all the way around it, and that girdles the tree and will cause damage to the tree. You're going to harvest storm fallen or pruned limbs, and you should start with just making a pint jar of medicine. So you're going to gather about 1 to 2 limbs that are about 1 inch in diameter. You're going to remove the outer and inner bark from those limbs, and then you're going to pour alcohol over your shaved bark at 60 to 70%. So you're going to use 60 to 70% alcohol. After 2 weeks, you can start using that extract, and you would start with a dosage of 1 to 2 droppers full of tincture at a 1 to 5, 60% at about a regularity of 3 times a day, and see how you respond. And I would give this plant 2 to 6 weeks to give it a solid try as far as taking it in your consistency. If you want more focused research and clinical insights, check out our Herbal Medicine Monthly Subscription, where I teach you all about 1 herb per month in depth, and I also ship you a kit with herbal preparations of that plant for you to taste and experience. And in my opinion, it's the best way to learn herbal medicine. This is Yaupon Holly, aka Ilex vomitoria, but don't let that scare you. The common name it actually is a great story. So the specific epithet, or the second name in this botanical name, comes from the Latin word vomitorius, meaning causing vomiting, as you might expect. It was mistakenly believed by early European settlers in North America that Yaupon induced vomiting. This was likely a belief that arose from observing indigenous ceremonies that involved consuming large quantities of Yaupon, which sometimes resulted in vomiting, which would happen with a whole bunch of drinking of Yaupon. But the plant itself does not induce vomiting. Rather, it was a reaction from the excessive consumption of Yaupon tea, followed by a very long and serious game of stickball, which is a great game. If you've never played it, I highly suggest looking it up. But Yaupon makes me so happy, primarily because of its common name, but also because it's found so commonly in landscaping, because it is a native plant. And so it's really nice to see native plants be so ubiquitous in landscaping. You might see this when you're going to get your nails done or outside of Costco. But I love Yaupon because it's not only a native plant, but it is a native caffeine-containing plant and is the only caffeine-containing plant in the South. So that means you can stop buying that expensive green tea now. It has a really nice grassy flavor, and you can do it like, you can harvest it and dry it immediately, or you can roast it, and that imparts a different flavor. I've made a lot of tea with Yaupon, but I've also made some really lovely skin oil that I made a few years ago, and it was really lovely, partially because, and I chose it partially because of the caffeine content and antioxidants in Yaupon. As far as botanical identification, the leaves are arranged in an alternate pattern. They are ovate leaves, slightly serrated edges that are kind of dulled. They are elliptical shaped. They're about 1 to 4 or 5 centimeters long and 1 to 2 centimeters broad. The leaf apex is rounded. And then, like I said, we have these kind of crenate, jagged edges. The leaves are glossy, and they're dark green on the upper side, and then they're a little bit lighter on the underside. And they produce tiny white flowers that are really, really, really little, and bright red berries. And yeah, so that's Yaupon Holly. Okay, let's recap. So evergreens give you aromatics that move in clear fluid, resins that can protect and support our skin and help with infections, and also used in muscle rubs. Bitters and astringent, we will use those for digestion and toning tissue. And the big takeaway is the same one I give beginners. You don't need more random uses. You really need a place to learn that is safe and knowledgeable and not fabricated by AI. I would love to hear in the comments what you're going to scout and make after watching this. You could grab some pine resin and make salve, roast your own Yaupon Holly, or use a juniper for a respiratory steam, maybe even a Magnolia nervine bitter. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'm excited to see you in the next one.